First of all, more people die from heart disease with normal to low cholesterol than high cholesterol. When your A1C is 7.5% or higher, every year it's at that level, 100 days come off your lifespan. I think a lot of people in our space who talk about Hormesis don't understand Hormesis. The average cold plunge coach, for example, you ask them, how long should I jump on this 39-degree plunge? And they'll say, 3 minutes, right? That's the wrong answer.
What are 2 lesser known, interesting supplements that people should know about?
I'm so glad you asked that because it was on my mind to share this, by the way. In the book, I talk about the supplement called vitamin
Ben Azadi. The tables have turned, my friend.
Yes.
This has been like, you've supported me over the years so much, and I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart, having me on since 2018, 2017.
Yeah. 5 times, I believe, total.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I apologize. Every time I have a book and I have to go to the rounds, and you help me out.
It's my honor, bro. I love learning from you and supporting your work.
Thanks, man. But this is a big deal. I'm so excited about this new book.
Thank you.
Like, you've had self-published books, which are amazing, but there's something, for me it is, of like being published through a big house like Hay House. How does it feel?
I'm excited. I'm very excited. Not so much for like the accolades of being a published author, but the reach this book is going to have.
Yeah, exactly. It's a vehicle.
It's a vehicle to reach the masses, which you've done so well. So I'm excited. I'm grateful for it. The book is going to change so many lives, and we are in dire straits. We need it really bad right now.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also a community too, because I'm not with Hay House, but what I hear from everyone at Hay House, they'll say it's like a family of people that are like supportive. The authors are supportive of each other.
That's what I'm seeing so far, and I'm loving it. Yeah, and I've always loved Hay House, and I was telling you, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, changed my life, and to be a Hay House author like they were, and they changed my life, saved my life literally from committing suicide.
Wow.
Dr. Wayne Dyer did, and to call myself a Hay House author like it's like full circle.
That
moment.
is a full circle.
Yeah.
Massive full circle. So we have to go there. Like, so what? You were at a low point in your life. What was going on? When was this? And then what pulled you out of it?
Well, most of my life I was unhealthy. As a child, I was obese physically, mentally. My mom worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken, by the way.
Okay, I didn't know that.
2 different Kentucky Fried Chickens, and she would bring me home fried chicken, and I was a happy kid, of course. And this resulted in me being really, really unhealthy as a kid. And nothing changed in my teenage years, growing up here in Miami, where we are right now. And as an adult, 23 years old, back in 2007, I found myself just rock bottom, 250 pounds. My whole body felt inflamed. Back was hurting, knees were hurting, joints were hurting. I was going through a bad breakup at this time, and I didn't know how to handle that breakup. So my first instinct was, you need to alleviate this pain, and the only way to do that is to take your own life.
Oh my gosh.
I was on the internet looking for the quickest and easiest ways to take your life without experiencing pain. Like, this is the search term that I put into the computer. And every time I explored suicide, I just kept thinking about my mom. It was the first thought, like, what would your mom have to deal with if you took your life? And I love my mom. She sacrificed so much for me, and it stopped me from taking my life. And it was a vicious cycle for months, exploring suicide, thinking about my mom, stopping myself. And I knew I had to figure things out. And then I started reading books. Dr. Wayne Dyer, he would say things that would just light me up. It opened up a whole new world because, I was blaming everyone for my problems. I was blaming my genetics for my bad genetics, my slow metabolism, my enabling family members. It's because of them that I'm overweight and obese and unhealthy, unhappy. And then Wayne Dyer said, if other people are the cause of your problems, you would have to hire a psychiatrist for the rest of the world in order for you to get better. And I thought, damn, that is the truth, the cold, hard truth. And he said something else that really woke me up. He said, what happens when you squeeze an orange? What comes out? Orange juice. Why is that? That's what's inside. So what happens when life squeezes you, applies pressure? What comes out is what's inside, your thoughts. And if you could change your thoughts, you could change the outcome of your life, your health, and everything moving forward. So I started to really pay attention to my thoughts and the self-image I had of myself. And that was the first shift. I took responsibility, took ownership. Then I started moving my body, eating healthy. And in 9 months, I went from 250 pounds to as low as 170 pounds, so 80 pounds of fat loss. My highest 34% body fat to as low as 6% body fat. And I finally achieved this physical six-pack. For me, it was a dream. But more importantly than that, mental six-pack is what I achieved. And I started to think healthy thoughts, and it got me out of depression and suicidal thoughts and addictive behaviors. And dude, that was 17 plus years ago, right? So I've kept the weight off. I've worked on my metabolism. But the starting point for me, like so many in our space, is a pain to purpose message.
Man, this is powerful. So for people like, oh, I never heard of Wayne Dyer. Maybe, I mean, we're super fans, but many people aren't. Like, what do you have like a book that pulled you out of that dark spot, like a specific one of his?
Yeah, change your thoughts, change your life.
Yeah,
it really helps you just take ownership, which is the first step. Gets you out of the victim mindset that most people have. And we live in a society, I know you see this, that we enable people to have a victim mindset. Let's discuss obesity just real quick in this perspective. Yeah. We see individuals that are prominent figures in the health space, sometimes even going on shows like 60 Minutes saying obesity is not your fault, it's a genetic problem, and they'll recommend maybe a medication for it to help, deal with it. But if our obesity rates were around 1 to 2% in 1930, and then by 2030, Harvard is saying it's going to be 50%. Our genetics don't change that fast, right? So I think telling people that it's just your genes makes them a victim. It makes them not take responsibility. So Wayne Dyer shifted that for me because I was that group of not taking responsibility. So Wayne Dyer is just a master. He's passed on now, but his books are incredible. He has audibles, but I would start, to answer your question, with change your thoughts, change your life, because that is where it starts.
One of his books I read, have you seen his sort of synopsis of the Tao Te Ching? I was like a great one too. Like he takes these ancient lessons and like puts them in a modern way. He was ahead of his time.
He was. He really studied all of those ancient wisdom, the Bhagavad Gita, and he just explains it in a way where it makes sense. Because when I read it, I'm like, what did I just read? He takes
abstract language and makes it more applicable. Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned the epidemic rise of obesity, and let's go. I'd be curious, before we dive into metabolic health and metabolic flexibility, something that came to mind that I want to get your hot take on. What's your thoughts on this Ozempic explosion?
Yeah, my gosh, right? We're dealing with a big explosion, especially in the fat loss, metabolic health space.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting research out there. I haven't looked at everything, of course. I go ahead.
I was going to say, but you say that, but you've read more research than 99.9% of the United States. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah,
on
and
GLP-1?
I've interviewed a few people.
Yes, a
few.
Thousands.
900 plus. 900 plus. Yeah. You're 5 of them. You're 5 of those episodes. We'll do another one.
So GLP-1 agonist, like, what's your take on it?
Yeah, so I have scientists who share some of the benefits, and I have some people showing the cons, right? So what are the cons? Well, you could lose some weight, yes. But some of the weight, maybe half of the weight that you'll lose, could be muscle mass. And we know how important muscle mass is for longevity, insulin sensitivity, and the metabolism. So we don't really want to get rid of muscle. We want to get rid of body fat. There's a difference between losing weight and losing fat. Ozempic will help you lose weight, and that includes muscle. And there's also scenarios where people go on these Ozempic medications and they feel they're not hungry anymore, right? It kind of mimics satiety. And you don't want to eat, so then you're in severe caloric restriction. You get what's called the Ozempic butt, the Ozempic face, and it looks really hollowing. So there's some cons there. But then there are some scenarios where low-dose Ozempic for a short period of time could assist somebody who's really struggling with obesity just to get them in the right direction, then take them off the medication, and then they're on their own with their lifestyle changes. So I could see that as a fit. Personally, I don't use it, and I don't recommend it to my students, but I can see how some people would use it in that aspect. But I think people overdo it, and it's very expensive too.
Yeah, that's how we've seen it, is like paired with dealing with metabolic freedom, which we'll talk about today. I do see it as being it's a peptide. It can be a tool in a low dose, microdose sort of way, but it's not always needed when you deal with metabolic freedom. Like it can be a tool, but it doesn't have to be a tool. There's many other tools without the potential side effects. I mean, what do you think of these studies coming out with the eye disease, like the non-arteritic ischemic neuropathy? What's your take on it?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of that coming out.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of studies showing that it leads to a lot of dangerous conditions. So I'm not surprised. We don't have any long-term studies on this. My premise, and I think we share a similar premise, is the body's built to heal itself. And whenever I could do that naturally, I'm going to go full effort with that. So I don't use Ozempic. I don't recommend it or promote it to any of my students and clients. I find every single way naturally to get the body to activate the innate intelligence to heal itself, remove the interference, allow the body to heal itself. So I think we're going to see more and more of these studies coming out showing, especially with long-term use and high dose use, a lot of side effects are happening there. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, like you just said, and we just said. There's a time and place for maybe low dose, changing your lifestyle, maybe getting off of
for
it.
a time,
not everybody does it that way.
Yeah, well, it's not the American way, right? They want they want their magic pill, the magic injection, and not look at lifestyle.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so what's the state of affairs? Beyond obesity, to talk about the staggering statistics of obesity. What metabolic health is so much more than just obesity. So can you talk about this sort of metabolic syndrome spectrum, if you will, and like how can people kind of have their aha moments of, oh, I didn't know that was quote unquote metabolic health?
Yeah, it's a great way to start.
Yeah.
Well, some of the studies, let's reference a few of them just so we get an idea of what's going on in America, and then we'll talk about the causes. 2016 Mayo Clinic put out a study. They were looking at how many Americans live an active, healthy lifestyle. That was the goal of the study. Let's find out how many Americans live an active, healthy lifestyle. And they based it off of 4 criteria. The first one was that they don't smoke cigarettes. The second one was they did exercise, moderate to vigorous exercise for 150 minutes total per week. The third one was that they ate a healthy diet, which was classified as a minimally processed diet. And the fourth criteria was that if they were a male, they had a body fat percentage under 20% and female under 30%. Based off of those 4 criteria, only 2.7% of Americans fit that criteria, which is a very, very small percentage. Then we have the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which you know this study in 2018 showing that about 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. And then in 2022, another study coming out showing it's closer to 93% of Americans being metabolically unhealthy. We have a problem. So what does this look like besides obesity and being overweight? Well, high blood pressure, migraines, PCOS, of course, type 2 diabetes. But for me, what I believe starts all of this, and I have a whole chapter in Metabolic Freedom about this, is our insulin levels. Insulin will rise before blood sugars rise. Studies are showing on average, you could have insulin resistance for 6 to 14 years with a perfect A1C, which is the 3-month average of your blood glucose, and a perfect fasting glucose. Meanwhile, you're insulin resistant.
Yeah.
And most people are not testing their fasting insulin. You test it because you're brilliant, but it's not on the standard lab report that people do every single year.
And it's a basic lab, right?
Yeah, it's super cheap too.
So super cheap, super conventional. Where do you want it? What's an optimal serum insulin fasting?
Single digits. 3 to 7 is optimal, but if you could just get it in the single digits, and you would go into that lab 12 to 14 hours fasted, you would draw the blood, and some companies actually have finger pricks now for fasting insulin, which is great. Yeah. And you want that to be in the single digits. If it's over 10, you have some signs of insulin resistance. If it's over 20, you're full on insulin resistant. But the standard reference range is between 3 and 25. So if you're 17, 22, your conventional doctor says you're fine. Let's continue to monitor this and make sure it doesn't go higher. But you're insulin resistant. And that will happen for years because your blood sugars are not changing because your body, your pancreas is so busy shouting out, screaming insulin that all of a sudden it can't do it anymore. You become deaf to the screams, and then your blood sugars rise, and then you have prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and that opens up a door to heart disease, cancer, and a whole bunch of other
it's a leading cause of heart attack and stroke.
Yes.
It doubles your risk of anxiety and depression. So going back to what you were saying mechanistically, because I think people maybe they heard it, maybe not. I want to make sure they heard it. Is that your body it's a compensatory mechanism. Your body's if the higher insulin, the hyperinsulinemia, are just functionally elevated at insulin, the body's trying to get blood sugar down, right? So you're going to see that because the body's trying to create homeostasis or maintain balance, but it's unsustainable. So it could be a decade plus before you see it, like something's got to give, and it becomes. What do you think of triglycerides? Because that's another one that I see elevated above 100 years before.
Yes.
So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I just want to add to what you just said about the insulin piece, and then I'll talk about triglycerides. There's a great analogy for this to really make sense for your audience, and Dr. Jason Fung gave me this analogy, so I want to give him credit. Yeah. But essentially, the analogy is this. Let's say I have my phone here, and I grab Spotify, and I put on headphones, and I start listening to music at, let's say, 50% volume with my headphones on, but I never take a break. 24/7 listening to music for weeks and months. After a few months, what's going to happen? I'm going to feel like the volume is decreasing. So instead of taking a break, I just increase the volume to, let's say, 60%. Keep doing that, nonstop music, 70%. Eventually, I get to 100% volume. I'm going deaf to the music. This is the same thing when we eat high carbohydrate processed foods. We're snacking all day long. Your beta cells in your pancreas is the Spotify, the music shouting out insulin, and your receptor sites for the insulin is your hearing. So what happens is you're going deaf to the screams of insulin. What's the solution? Dial down the music, right?
Yeah.
Practice time-restricted feeding. Eat a low-carb or ketogenic diet. Like, we need to lower insulin because all of a sudden you'll go deaf to the screams of insulin, and then you get diagnosed. But triglycerides are just a byproduct of stored fat, right? When we have too much fat floating around and we're storing too much fat, we're going to see the triglycerides increase. And that's one of the markers for assessing heart disease. I want to see mine personally under 70. It's usually under 70 for me. And I like to look at triglycerides and compare it to my HDL.
Yeah.
And get the, I like to have a 1-to-1 ratio of triglycerides to HDL. If you're 1.5 or below, that's good, but I like a 1-to-1 personally. But yeah, those who have metabolic syndrome, when I look at their labs, they're 150, 220. I've seen somebody over 300, sometimes 400.
You'll see HDL dip below 59, and you'll see tris go above 100 easily.
Correct.
Yeah, and then with that third piece, that serum insulin, fasting insulin.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good. Any other metabolic labs while we're talking about it that you recommend anybody?
Yeah, A1C is always a good one. I mean, it's always in your standard report. If you work for a corporate company, they usually order it for you. Now, your A1C is looking at your 3-month average of your blood sugars. And if you're 5.7% or to 6.4%, you're considered pre-diabetic, and then 6.5% or higher, you're considered diabetic. Again, that's not going to change for many years, even if you have insulin resistance. So a fasting insulin is the most important test here, especially in the beginning. Once your A1C is at that point over 6.5%, it rapidly ages you. There's a study that I reference in the book, Metabolic Freedom, that shows when your A1C is 7.5% or higher, every year it's at that level, 100 days come off your lifespan.
Wow.
So if it's at that level for 15 years, you lose 4 years off your lifespan. That's how destructive high levels of blood sugars are. So I would throw in A1C. And if we're thinking about heart disease, I would also look at LDL particles, the lipids, and even C-reactive HSCRP as well as an inflammatory marker.
Yeah, where do you want the HSCRP?
I like it under 0.5. I'm usually under 0.2, 0.3, so I like it under 0.5. What about you?
Yeah, same. Yeah. Which is the same as the AHA, the CDC, like American Heart Association, and CDC. Okay, homocysteine, what do you think of that one?
That's a good one too. Yeah, single digits. We want that in the single digits. I've seen a lot of people with MTHFR have that increase. They have methylation issues. So taking methylated B vitamins could help with that. But I want to see that in the single digits.
Yeah, and that's another inflammation marker for people to know. Like this is like standard stuff. So using the data that you just said, like depending on the study that someone cites, about 7% UNC study said of the United States, only 7% of us have optimal ranges in these labs. So would you recommend everybody get these labs done to at least check in?
100%. Will. I mean, it's so important to be proactive and not reactive. Einstein used to say, intellectuals solve problems, geniuses prevent them. Right? Let's all be geniuses here. So the labs we just mentioned are very important. I'd love to talk a little bit about the cholesterol piece. Just because that's the number one question I get, because I teach keto, carnivore,
and you mentioned about the NMR panel.
Yes, exactly.
The particles, bring the context to what we talked about with this special type of cholesterol panel.
Correct. And I'll share my personal story. And of course, this is my N of 1 experience, and everybody's different. But last year I did 90 straight days of a carnivore diet.
I was following along from the sidelines.
Oh, did you?
Yes,
Okay.
Social media. I was watching you. I was like, what's my buddy doing?
Yeah, so I did that. And I've done carnivore 30 days, 45 days, but I decided to do 3 months. And I did comprehensive labs on day 1. I did a stool test on day 1. I put on a continuous glucose monitor, looked at my Oura Ring stats, and then I did 90 straight days, and then I retested all those labs again with the cholesterol piece. So my total cholesterol was already high on day 1. It was like 250. On day 90 of carnivore, and for those who don't know, carnivore is eating nothing but animal products. So meat, fish, eggs, dairy, just anything from an animal is what I did. My total cholesterol went from around 250 to 450. My total LDL went from 250 on day 1 to 350.
Okay.
However, my C-reactive protein was under 0.3 both times. My fasting insulin was 3.2 both times. My homocysteine was in single digits both times. And the LDL particles, which is the NMR profile, the majority of my particles were the pattern A, the good, large, and fluffy pattern, which actually supports longevity and supports your immune system. I had a really small percentage of the pattern B, the small sticky. So even though my total LDL was very high, my total cholesterol was very high, I was actually at very low risk of heart disease because the particles were the nice, good particles, and my inflammatory markers were all optimal with my insulin.
So what was your small dense LDLP, these oxidized particles that carry cholesterol? What was the decrease between before carnivore and after? Did you see a decrease in that?
It went up. It went up after carnivore.
Okay.
The oxidized?
The oxidized.
Oh, no, that went
dense.
down.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It was already low on day one.
I figured it was already low.
It was under 400 on day one, and I think it went like around 320. So it went a little bit low, but it was already good on day one.
It was already good.
Yeah.
So this is an important point. So he already had the quality of the particles that carry cholesterol was already good, but it didn't get worse. It got better marginally and stayed in the good pattern. So can you kind of bring context? Many people, like some people know the NMR test, like we run it for every telehealth patient. So
I love it.
Can you talk about what we're talking about with particles? Because they don't even, they hear about cholesterol. What are you talking about particles?
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, first of all, more people die from heart disease with normal to low cholesterol than high cholesterol.
Yeah.
I'm actually more concerned when somebody has a total cholesterol under 200 than like I did, 450, right? We know it starves the body, the sex hormones. It builds everything for us, and including the brain. LDL is also something that total LDL is not really giving you much data because we're not looking at the particle sizes. There are two different particle sizes as we mentioned. You have the pattern A, which is called large fluffy, which goes right through your arteries. It actually builds your immune system. There's studies showing it helps with longevity. Then you have the particle sizes for LDL that are inflammatory, that are small and sticky. They get lodged into your arterial wall, create damage, and create inflammation and heart disease. So an NMR, which is a nuclear magnetic resonance test, which I love that you run, looks at the particle sizes. So it gives you your total LDL, particle totals, but the particle sizes. Looking at that with all the other moving parts we mentioned will help you understand if you're at risk of heart disease or not. Unfortunately, most conventional doctors are so trigger happy to write a statin because the statin industry made over $13 billion last year, and there's a lot of money with these statins. So we want to look at the full picture and not be bullied by our doctors.
Yeah. Okay, so after this experiment of carnivore, do you stay there? Like with that number that is increased, like that's in the 400s total cholesterol, even though it was good quality, like my mind would go to, like I'm just putting my clinical hat on, is like, okay, I still, yes, we know total cholesterol by itself is not a full picture of it, but I think you could shift the type of way you did carnivore, and it could probably modulate that number a little bit, like being more pescatarian, fish-centric, or there's no need to stay strict carnivore. That was an experiment done for a specific time. Yeah. So you wanted to see what it did for you and be your own N1 experiment. What did you do after that point when you retested?
So I agree with you. I don't like long-term carnivore for myself, or even long-term ketosis. I like the idea of going in and out. That's metabolic freedom, not just sticking with one diet long-term. Yeah. Once I had carbohydrates and vegetables and fibers, my total cholesterol and LDL shot back down. Okay, this is a good point. I'm what's considered a what is the term? Hyper lean responder. I forget the actual term, but I'm lean, and when I have an increase in saturated fat and cholesterol, especially like carnivore, I get it shoots up. So I respond really quickly. But once I have carbs, even if it's once a week, which is what I'm doing now, a high carb day once a week, those numbers actually go back down. So,
interesting. So a cyclical approach is really an amazing tool for you and many other people.
Yeah.
Are there people that you think should be in long-term ketosis? And who, if so, who would be that kind of person to consider that?
Yeah, and for your audience, a lot of people think keto and carnivore are different. They kind of are, but they're also the same. When you're doing carnivore, you're in ketosis. Ketosis is not a diet; it's a metabolic state, a metabolic process. So when you do carnivore, you're essentially zero carbs, and that is you're entering a state of ketosis. For some people who are severely metabolically challenged, diabetes, those who have neurological conditions like epilepsy, obviously they need to be in ketosis longer. They need to do therapeutic doses. If you have epilepsy, you're working with a professional. You probably have to do it for the rest of your life, or find a way that it works for you. For somebody who has diabetes and insulin resistance, you do it until you've done enough work where you're now insulin sensitive and you can start flexing out and doing it appropriately. In the carnivore and keto space, a lot of my colleagues don't agree to this approach. I speak at conferences, and I'll be on a panel with maybe 5 or 6 other keto and carnivore doctors, and all of them are saying, we need to be in ketosis forever. It's the primary fuel for the body. And then I'm there saying, no, actually, like, that's another form of metabolic inflexibility. Most people are burning sugar. 93% of people that are in a keto deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And then people in my space are only burning fat, another form of metabolic inflexibility. We want a metabolism that could burn sugar when we need to, and then burn fat. And that's the way I live my life.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, and people like carbs, right? There's a certain level of practical sustainability for the average person that's not a wonky researcher that just lives and breathes this stuff, right? It's like not. It has to be enjoyable and sustainable for the average person. So what's that cyclical approach look like for you? That cyclical
for me. Yeah. So for me, my current routine is Monday through Saturday, I eat a carnivore diet. I'm actually in ketosis.
Okay.
Sunday is what I call a metabolic flex day. And I write about this in the book where I actually have 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrates on a Sunday.
Okay.
I don't fast. But it's not unhealthy carbs.
Yeah.
It's fruit, it's white rice, it's like sweet potatoes, but I eat an abundance of it. I'm burning sugar on purpose for that day. And then Monday I'm back to fat burning. So that's one way to do it. That works for me, and I've done this for a very long time. But for some people, there could be different variations to it.
And we could talk about different variations. I'd be curious. But okay, so a carnivore day, you're 6 days out of the week. What's a day in the life look like?
Yeah, so today before I came here, I had 3 burgers with goat cheese, and that was it. 3 burgers with goat cheese, grass-fed. There was an egg that was mixed into it, and I usually eat red meat, lamb, seafood, like small fatty fish. I really do well with eggs as well. Dairy, I don't do really good with dairy unless it's goat and sheep dairy, so I'll have goat and sheep dairy. But red meat, man, that's my go-to. If we go to dinner, I'm just gonna have the red meat.
So do you eat? That's a good question. What do you eat out? Okay.
Yeah.
So where do you? I'm assuming you're finding like a good steak place, right? So where do you go? What's your go-to eating out with this way of eating?
As long as there's a piece of steak or a burger, I have an option, right? If I get a burger, it's just without the bun, and if I get the steak, it's without the side. And sometimes I'll get 2 burgers or even a big 24-ounce steak. So you could find that at an Italian restaurant. Fish is something I'll find too on the menu. It's not hard, so it's not that difficult. It can be a little socially restrictive for sure doing carnivore, especially like during the holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas when, my mom makes this delicious meal and she doesn't understand carnivore yet. She's asking me if I could have lentils and I'm saying, no, that's not carnivore. She doesn't like when I do carnivore. But you could find a piece of steak or a burger or fish or seafood anywhere.
Are you tracking, I don't say macros. Are you tracking calories? I mean, let's talk about macros because you mentioned ketosis is a metabolic state. Like technically, a ketogenic diet is higher fat, moderate protein, lower carb. So you're not concerned about moderating protein, like the longevity research and all of that stuff. What's your thought on that during your carnivore days?
So my thoughts on protein, and I want to hear your thoughts too. My thoughts on protein has changed a lot over the years. I used to be really against too much protein on keto or even carnivore. I was teaching people to do moderate to low protein. Personally, now I actually focus on hitting my protein requirements. For me, it's a gram of protein per pound of my ideal body weight. So that's about 180 grams of protein. Now, I don't do that every day. I'll have days where I'm in a protein deficit. Sometimes I'll do 1 meal a day if I'm traveling, and obviously I'm not going to get that amount of protein in a day. I'm not too concerned in terms of you're referring to like mTOR. Because I balance that out with autophagy. As long as you're balancing out with the opposite of mTOR, which is autophagy, which is more catabolic and cleaning up, I balance that out with autophagy with fasting and strength training. So as long as I'm doing that, I'm not concerned with too much protein.
No, I agree with you. Okay, so let's go to the carb cycling days. 300 to 400 grams of carbs from whole foods. How do you implement those carbs? How are you integrating them into your meal?
Yeah, so on that day, I'm not fasting. And here's an important note. I'm glad you brought this up. A high carb day is a low fat day. Part of the reason why we have metabolic disease is high carb and high fat, right?
Mixed meal.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah.
It activates the Randle cycle. Your body prioritizes the glucose. The fat pulls up in your bloodstream and you're inflamed.
Yeah.
So
it's metaflammation or the research is really kind of, it's not great.
It's not. So if you're going to increase your carbs intentionally, it needs to be a low-fat day. It could be a high-protein day and a high-carb day, but it needs to be, let's say, under 40 total grams of fat, which is a low-fat day. For me, it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm not fasting. I'm enjoying myself. True Foods Kitchen is my jam.
Dude, same.
No seed oils, right?
Yeah.
That's usually what I do. I'll make some a fruit salad, and I do really well with white rice as opposed to brown rice.
Yeah.
So I'll do that. But I want to share my gut results from the carnivore experiment.
Oh,
can I share that with you?
Share it, man.
Because this is fascinating.
Yeah. What did you find?
Well, first of all, it's the complete opposite of what we think about gut health. It really changed my paradigm, and I've had a few gut specialists review it, and it changed their paradigm. So,
because the fiber deficiency.
Correct. You would think.
Yeah.
So I'll explain. I did a stool test on day 1 of the carnivore diet experiment. And when I got my results back for the day 1 of the test, it came in about 3 weeks into this carnivore experiment. When I reviewed the results, it showed my diversity was average. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was average. And it shows the relationship in different bacterias and how to improve it. So it gives you this report of how to increase your diversity and improve some of these relationships in the gut. And it actually said less keto, less red meat, more plants, more fiber, more of a plant-based approach is what the lab said to do to increase diversity. Obviously, I did the complete opposite. I kept going 90 days, and then I retested again. You would think, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster when you retest, because I did the opposite of what they said to do. But what ended up happening when I retested on day 90, my diversity increased.
Interesting.
I had 5 keystone bacteria show up on day 90 that did not show up on day 1.
Akkermansia come up?
Yep, Akkermansia came up. And then 7 core bacteria showed up on day 90 that did not show up on day 1.
Fascinating.
Complete opposite.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I would venture to guess, and I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
If I stayed in carnivore for 6 to 12 months, I would have probably seen the opposite effect. Kind of like the
diminishing return.
Yeah,
diminishing return. Yeah, I agree with that. Well, you look at the Hadza tribe, right, in Tanzania, and the same thing. Like they're eating like blood and meat during seasonal, right? It's a seasonal thing, and their microbiomes are some of the healthiest in the world. They have great bacterial diversity.
Yeah.
What do you think it is? Like, okay, we just think fiber, polyphenols above all is what produces bacterial diversity. Mm-hmm. What do you think was happening there for you?
I think it was a combination of a couple things, and I've gone deep into this with Dr. Pompa because he was so fascinated about this.
Yes.
I think number one, it was a dietary shift. It was a stress, and it forced my gut microbiome to adapt to that stress. Kind of like fasting. Fasting could increase diversity by stressing it. I think this was such a severe dietary shift for me that it created a stress that increased diversity. I think that was one part of it. The other part of it is that it created like this gut flexibility, microbiome flexibility, if you will, where my bacteria that were breaking down fibers and carbohydrates didn't have a job to do. So now the bacteria that were breaking down fat and protein adapted, and it just created a different ratio with the different bacteria. Akkermansia did go up, by the way. So I think it was a combination of both. It was the change. It was such a severe change that it just forced my microbiome to adapt.
Which is another thing, going back to that, what I talked about, this sort of seasonal approach and the different, ancestral cultures would do, right? Based on food availability, the mixing it up back to the flexibility part of metabolic flexibility is what our body tends to like, right? And living closer to the rhythms of nature of what our ancestors would have done. I'm curious, during that carnivore experiment, you mentioned not being great with dairy, but doing some dairy. I'm curious on like fermented dairy, and maybe that's contribution. I know it's not totally that, but do you think that dairy helped at all with contributing to the bacterial diversity?
I didn't have much fermented dairy.
Okay.
I mean, I did have some goat cheese and sheep cheese, but I didn't really have like.
I just need to see your food log, man.
No, it was pretty simple.
Okay.
It was red meat.
Yeah.
It was eggs. It was sometimes goat cheese, like raw goat cheese, and
so not like yogurts or kefir.
I didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have any of that.
Got it. All right. Very interesting. I think there's something to that sort of flexibility. So what you mentioned, okay, the keto purists, if you will, are kind of in their own form of metabolic inflexibility. So how does somebody know like what their type of cyclical approach, what they should do? Because some women do it around their menstrual cycle. If you could kind of shed light on the different ways of being cyclical, and then how do they find their way? Yeah,
it's important to understand that it is done differently based off the person. Men do it differently than women, and of course, women who have a menstrual cycle do it differently than women who are postmenopausal. So for women who have a menstrual cycle, we know that their hormones are more 28-day pattern. I like the way Dr. Stephanie Estima explains it. They're like the moon, right? 28-day pattern. Us guys like the sun, 24-hour pattern. So women. especially the week before their cycle, they want to build estrogen and progesterone, and they don't do that with fasting and ketosis and carnivore. So the week before the period is a good week to have these what I call flex days. Maybe it's the 5 days prior to their period or the 7 days prior to build progesterone and estrogen. That's just one example, but that isn't, I've seen that, and I've taken over 5,000 students through my keto protocols, and a lot of them are women who have a menstrual cycle. And when we apply this, okay, we're going to get out of ketosis. We're not going to do much fasting. We're going to feast 150 grams of carbs, healthy carbs, the 5 to 7 days before your period. Once you get your bleed, we go back to fasting and ketosis or carnivore if they're doing that. That works really well for menstruating women.
Yeah.
For postmenopausal women, there are it's a time of their life where their ovaries have retired. The ovaries have done the job, and now the adrenal glands pick up the slack, right? So stress masterment is what I call it, is really important at this time. So finding ways to boost oxytocin is key for postmenopausal ladies. They could do ketone fasting, but I have them check their HRV, their heart rate variability. And if they see their heart rate variability starting to decline and they're implementing keto fasting or any kind of biohack, actually, I have them scale back. All right, more feasting, less plunging, whatever it is. So I use HRV as a gauge for postmenopausal women, and for men, we could be more aggressive. Yeah. But I like looking at sleep, HRV for men as well, and also blood glucose and ketones as a gauge to see if you're doing it.
So
right.
For people that don't know about HRV, like what is that, and how did they find theirs?
Yeah, HRV is a really important metric. In the book, I talk about the importance of tracking it, especially in the biohacking space. In a few days, I'll be doing a keynote at a Biohacker Expo here in Miami.
Oh, cool.
And I'm going to be talking about Hormesis and how I think a lot of people in our space who talk about Hormesis, especially the biohacking space, don't understand Hormesis. And this is going to tie back to the HRV thing, because we hear about cold plunging, we hear about sauna, and I have both at my house. But the average cold plunge coach, for example, you go to these cold plunge clinic and you ask them, how long should I jump in this 39-degree plunge? And they'll say, 3 minutes, right? That's the wrong answer, right? If somebody's really unhealthy, mitochondrially challenged, you get into a cold plunge for 3 minutes, they're going to have a panic attack. They could have a stroke. They're going to wipe themselves out. They violated Hormesis. So Hormesis essentially means you apply a stress to the body, you adapt to the stress, and now you're stronger and healthier. But if that stress is too much for your body to adapt to, now you're weaker and you're inflamed. So HRV, heart rate variability, helps you understand if you're applying too much stress or if you're adapting to the stress. It's essentially looking at the balance of your autonomic nervous system. You have your sympathetic tone, fight or flight, your parasympathetic tone, rest and digest. We want a good balance of both. When your heart rate variability is declining, it means you're too much in a sympathetic state, fight or flight. You're applying too much stress. Maybe it's too much cold plunge, too much fasting, whatever it is. But the interesting thing is that everybody has a different HRV. So you cannot compare. I cannot compare my HRV to yours, Will. We want to find our average, maybe test it for 7 days, 14 days with an Oura Ring, Whoop Band, and whatever it is, and then get your average. Let's say it's 37, and you want to work on building it up.
Yeah.
The higher it goes, the better you're staying in that hormetic zone, the more stress you could apply. If it starts to decline, you're applying too much stress. So I like that as a gauge to see if your life is working the right way.
Also to not get so mired down in becoming obsessed with it either, right? Because then people stressing about something's about the parasympathetic, right? Which isn't good either.
That's good.
And any words of wisdom on okay, this data is good. We love data, but to not let the data be a source of obsession or stress.
This is true, because sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and I'll feel great, and I'll say, "Wow, that was a good night of sleep," and I'll look at my Oura Ring, and I'm like, maybe it wasn't a great night of sleep. Should I let this ring tell me how I'd feel? So, your body is the best measurement, right?
Check in with your intuition.
Yeah, you're all about that.
Your gut feeling.
Yeah, you're all about that. So how do you feel, right? If you feel great, even if your HRV is dipping, you feel great, and that's all that matters. If you felt like you slept great and you feel great, you should have more energy after these biohacks, not less. If you do a cold plunge or a sauna or a PEMF or red light therapy or a workout, you should feel more energized and better the rest of the day, not worse.
And if it's a source of stress or anxiety, simplify your life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just less is more sometimes. That's okay. Be your own biohack device.
Amen. Amen.
So how do our thoughts, like these non-food and the physiological things, how does our mindset impact our metabolic flexibility?
Oh, this is our jam right here. You have your famous quote of, you cannot heal a body you hate. I love that.
Thanks,
Since
man.
you said that, it just resonated with me because I live that.
Yeah.
You cannot heal a body you hate. That is the absolute truth. And if you have thoughts of your self-image that are inflammatory, you're gonna do things to sabotage yourself. You could go on a diet plan, you could do whatever you want, but you'll find a way to go back to homeostasis, which is the way you see yourself. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. When I lost 80 pounds back in 2008, went from, I told you, down to 170 pounds, I had a physical six-pack, and I was looking at myself in the mirror, looking at my abs. But my self-image of myself, my thoughts, was that of an obese man. That's the way I always viewed myself. I was bullied. I was picked on. I wore T-shirts in swimming pools and at the beach. Like, that was my self-image. And you cannot outperform your self-image. So I kept finding ways to get back to the way I viewed myself, meaning I would go to the kitchen and eat the ice cream, eat the Oreos, start to pack the fat back on to match the way I viewed myself. It wasn't until I changed my thoughts about myself and my self-image that I stopped doing that. And the way that I did it was I literally wrote down on an index card that self-image of myself. And I wrote it in the present tense. I'm so happy and grateful now that I'm healthy, I'm lean, the perfect health I seek is now seeking me. I remove any blockages between us. And I live that to this day. I mean, I have like all my goals I write down and I read it and I affirm that as many times as possible to get it from my conscious mind to my subconscious mind. And once it's there, it's there. And your thoughts influence the way you view yourself, the way you view this world. The average person has 60,000 thoughts a day. Wayne Dyer used to talk about this. And 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts from yesterday, and 85% of those thoughts are negative thoughts. Zig Ziglar called it stinking thinking. And I always say, if your thinking is stinking, your dreams, they're shrinking, right? So we're not thinking, though. I mean, mental activity is not the same thing as thinking. So many people are just going through the motions. They don't have an original thought. They're doing whatever society has taught them to do. Autopilot. They're just in their subconscious mind. So we need to change that. And just to give you an example of how your thoughts influence your health, right? In the book Metabolic Freedom, I talk about the placebo effect. We all know the placebo effect, but I don't think everybody knows where it came from. Yeah. And I share the story in the book, and I'd love to share it right now.
I would love you to share it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in World War II, there was a doctor named Dr. Henry Beecher. He worked with the United States government, and he was working at a medical tent. And he had all these soldiers coming into the tent with they had bullet wounds, limbs blown off. It was a scary situation. So he would administer morphine, which would stabilize the soldiers. They would transfer them to the hospital, perform surgery, save their life. But one of these evenings where he was working in the tent, they ran out of morphine. And the nurse noticed that there was no more morphine. She didn't know what to do. She's in a panic. She's freaking out. She ends up putting saline solution, salt water, in the needles, telling Dr. Beecher, I'm giving you more morphine. So he had the belief he had morphine, and he would tell the soldier, I'm giving you morphine. You're going to feel better in a matter of seconds. We're going to save your life. Let me just administer this to you. So he transferred his belief to the soldier. He would inject them with saline solution, and it would stabilize them because they thought they were getting morphine long enough to transfer them to the hospital and save their life. The war ended, and then Harvard studied what happened at that medical tent, and that's where the placebo effect originated. Yeah. And now every study is matched with the placebo, right?
And something that we always said as a pejorative, it's a placebo. When you do a placebo, it's not, right? I mean, to me, it's so beautiful.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
There's also the nocebo effect.
Yeah, so the nocebo cases are wild.
It's crazy.
Can you go over some?
Yeah, so there's another story that I share in the book about the nocebo, and it's a story, I got this from Bob Proctor, my late and great mentor, and he shared this. It's a story from the 1960s of a railroad employee. He worked on a train station, and he worked inside of a refrigerator cart in this train. And one night he was working late. It was 11 p.m., and everybody had went home, but he was still working. He locked himself in the refrigerator cart, and he's banging on that door. He's trying to get out. He's freezing. Nobody's around. So he knows he's stuck. He knows he's there for the whole night. So he starts to write down on the wall, kind of documenting his night. And at 12 a.m., he writes down on the wall, I'm stuck. Nobody's here. I don't know how I'm going to make it into the morning. 2 a.m., freezing. I can't warm myself up. I think I'm going to freeze to death. 4 a.m., I can barely move my body. I'm going to die out here. Okay, 7 a.m. rolls around. his coworkers clock in. They open up that refrigerator cart, and the man's dead. He froze to death. Here's the interesting thing. The temperature apparatus that he was looking at was malfunctioning for days. And the temperature never got below 55 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
His thoughts created death. And if our thoughts could do that, do you think our thoughts could heal the body as well? The answer is 100% yes.
Yeah. My gosh. I've seen that's crazy. I've seen reports where people believed they had a terminal cancer. The doctor told them they had terminal cancer, died, did the autopsy. There's no cancer.
Wow.
I mean, it's like wild anecdotal stories that are research in journals or in medical journals of this phenomenon of nocebo, which is like the inverse of placebo, right? It's the same thing, really. It's just the power of positive versus
That's
negative.
right. Faith versus fear.
Yeah. Yes. Man, this has been a blessing. Before we go, the podcast is called The Art of Being Well. At the end, we have your Art of Being Well. This is Ben Azadi's Art of Being Well. What's the worst tasting healthy food that you eat? It tastes disgusting, but you do it for the health benefits.
Sardines.
Really?
Sardines are really good for you. I don't like the way they taste.
Why are they good for you?
I have a great amount of EPA, DHA, omega-3 fatty acids. They're a very small fish, so less toxins than like a bigger fish.
Yeah.
But I do not like the taste.
Nor do I.
But
Is there
they're
any
so good for you.
any tip to make them at least a little more palatable?
Yeah. I put olive oil, really good olive oil, and sea salt, and then I kind of smash it and then eat it like tuna,
Okay.
and then it helps it. But it's just still not that great.
Do you take? I know the answer is you take supplements. What are 2 lesser known, interesting supplements that people should know about?
I'm so glad you asked that because it was on my mind to share this. By the way,
Oh, cool.
You read my mind. In the book, I talk about the supplement called vitamin G. And this supplement is anti-inflammatory. It also helps. UC Davis shows that when they studied individuals that had vitamin G in their bloodstream, they had lower blood pressure levels, lower A1C levels, which is their blood glucose levels. Dr. Joe Dispenza did vitamin G workshops where they took vitamin G for 9 to 10 minutes, 3 times per day, 3 days in a row, and measured their IgA levels and their cortisol levels, and it showed their cortisol levels dropped, their immune system boosted significantly. It turns on chemicals such as oxytocin, GABA, serotonin, dopamine as soon as you take it. Mm-hmm. And vitamin G is the practice of gratitude.
I knew you were going with that. I was like, bro,
because you live it.
Yeah.
And those are all studies on gratitude.
Yeah,
right? I call it a supplement, and there's no upper limit.
I love that.
And it's
heals. Completely free.
It's completely free. And here's the thing. It's not an intellectual practice, gratitude. It's an emotional practice. Yeah. You don't treat it like a checklist. I tell people
somatic practice.
Yes. I tell people all the time, instead of writing down 10 things you're grateful for, choose one thing, one relationship, and spend an entire minute there and put as many feelings as possible. You'll get way more from it doing that than just doing the 10 things you're grateful for checklist. But that's a supplement. I guess it's not. It's like an indirect answer.
I love it. Vitamin G is number 1. What's number 2?
Number 2, minerals. I mean, I think we're so mineral deficient, Will, with our soils and our crops. So I think we just need good quality. Yeah. So fulvic and humic minerals, I feel incredible with fulvic and humic minerals.
Yeah.
I think most people would benefit by taking minerals.
Great answer. What are these patches on your arms? I want to ask you.
I have them all over my body, actually. So I
can only see these.
Yeah, I have these 2. I have one here and one behind my neck and then one right here. These are called LifeWave patches. They're phototherapy patches, and they're really interesting. So the body naturally emits heat. We know that. We could see like night vision cameras pick up the body's heat, and that heat with these patches is redelivered back to the body. So it's low dose phototherapy, kind of like photobiomodulation, but very low dose. It has amino acids and certain sugars in the patches, and then you're putting them on certain acupuncture pressure points to elicit an innate response. It's non-transdermal. So, for example, these 2 are called the energy patches, and they're put here specifically to activate beta oxidation, which is fat burning, helps the mitochondria burn more fat. The one I have behind my neck is the most interesting one because it activates GHK in the body, which then signals stem cells. Mm-hmm. They have 92 clinical studies, which is really fascinating. So the one behind my neck is a stem cell patch. They have a melatonin patch, a glutathione patch, L-carnitine patch. So
very cool.
I've been wearing them for 8 months, and I've noticed a difference with my sleep and recovery.
Yeah.
And one quick story: my fiance's dad just turned 89 a few months ago, and we're having lunch with him and her mom. And he's not eating, and I'm looking at him, and I'm asking, are you okay? And he's having severe pain in his jaw. So I have these patches, and a couple of them help with pain. So I asked him, can I put these patches behind your neck? And he said, sure. So I put these patches behind his neck, and within 10 minutes, 100% of his pain was gone.
Wow.
My cat was dealing with mold symptoms because we lived in a moldy home, so she was like congested. There's no placebo effect with cats, right?
Yeah.
I put the patch on her neck. Within 5 seconds, all of her wheezing went away.
Wow.
When I saw that, I'm like, there's something here. So I wear them.
I love it. What's the name of the company?
LifeWave.
LifeWave.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe there is placebo with cats, and that's okay.
And that's okay, right? We just established that's powerful. Yeah.
The cats are like, I believe it.
Like, what is this? Okay, I'm going to feel better.
No, that's amazing, man. I have to look into that. But it makes sense. I mean, meridians, the science, it's the concept of meridian, but it's non-transdermal, which is what's interesting to me. So it's like acupressure in a way, right? It's
exactly.
Similar to acupressure.
Yeah.
Which is solid. What's some place that you haven't been to that is on your bucket list, like world travel wise?
Italy.
Any place?
I don't know. I mean, I ask people and they just tell me all over Italy is amazing. Yeah. Have you been?
I've been to Venice.
And?
But I heard I loved it a lot. I'm hearing lots of things about I'm hearing lots of things. It's not like a secret, but the Amalfi Coast is like, everyone's like, you have to see that.
My fiance keeps talking about that. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I watched the White Lotus TV show. Season 2 was in Sicily, and I fell in love with it from the TV show. Now the new one's in Thailand, and I'm like, I want to go to Thailand.
I had on the podcast, Patrick Schwarzenegger was on the podcast. We recorded the episode of The Art of Being Well while he was in Thailand on set.
That's awesome.
For White Lotus. I've never seen the show, so I was like, not that.
It's a really great show. It's a little raunchy.
Yeah.
But it's really well done, and it just makes you want to visit that location.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
I heard they killed off Jennifer Coolidge.
They did in season. Oh yeah.
So the
spoiler alert! He ruined it for you. You're supposed to say spoiler alert before you spoil it. Yeah, they did in season 2. Yeah.
Hopefully I didn't. Oh man.
She was great, but yeah, it's already too late.
Yeah. It's ruined it. We could censor it out, but I won't. I won't. All right, my friend. Where do people get the book? Where do people go to learn about your work?
Yeah. Thank you, Will. It's an honor, first of all.
Thanks,
I love and appreciate you. I've been admiring your work and just I'm inspired by you all the time.
Thanks,
it's an honor to be on your show. Really.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Likewise. Book. Thank you. The book is out May 13th. Audible, which I'm narrating, and I know you did yours.
It's a beast.
It's a pain. I'm actually going to the studio tomorrow to finish it. And paperback, hardcover, and then Kindle, so whatever you like to use. The book is available May 13th. Dr. Mindy Pelz wrote the foreword.
Amazing. And
she's amazing, of course. The book, you could pre-order it now or order it depending on when you're watching or listening to it. We'll have a free gift. We're giving away a free course on the metabolism with 12 lessons that I recorded myself. And exclusive interviews with Dr. Jason Fung, Gary Brecka, Dr. Daniel Pompa, Megan Ramos, and Cynthia Thurlow, all for free. Amazing. If you go to metabolicfreedombook.com, you'll see the different places to buy the book. You just put your name and order number, and you'll be automatically sent that course with the free interviews as well.
Amazing. Ben, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah.